There are a lot of other issues
I'll tell you what's shocking to me.
Yeah.
First of all, and taking sort of a global look at them, I mean, there are a lot of things that I thought were grossly unfair to having tried cases and grossly unfair about it, and I disagree with the rulings, but you have an indictment that is so unclear. I don't know what he's charged with. I just don't know the crime. So the first time, and charging document is supposed to inform the person, here's what you're up against. Then the first time I hear anything is an opening statement by the prosecutor when he says that the conspiracy is to commit election interference, which or an influence an election, which, and of course, every politician does that, so I'm not quite clear on that. Then when you go through the trial, still uncertain what it is, then you get to closing arguments, and in the federal system, and in what I'm accustomed to, the prosecution goes first, so at least you can find out finally what it is that the prosecution said you did. Well, instead, in this instance, the defense is going forward, having no idea what you're arguing against, does a closing argument, does it for 2 hours, and then the prosecution does a 5.5 hour, and you have no chance to rebut it. None.
That's clearly error, and it wasn't preserved as far as I know. The rule in New York generally is that the defense goes first, which is absurd, violates the privilege against self-incrimination, violates due process. But in a case like this, where you don't even know what the charges are, to have the charges laid out for the first time in the closing argument without the defense having an opportunity to rebut should have been a major issue that was raised and preserved by the defense, and they didn't do it as far as I can tell. Look, I have to read the whole transcript before I second-guess the lawyers, but I can tell you I was in the courthouse enough, and I know enough about this to know this was not a distinguished performance by a great defense lawyer. Trump could have gotten a lot better, and I hope he gets a lot better on appeal, even though it's going to be hard to win this appeal. No judge in New York is going to want to have to go to events in New York and people point the finger at him and say, that's the guy who allowed Trump to run for president. He's the reason that he's our next president. Nobody wants that in New York, and so it's very hard to get a fair shake in New York at the trial level or even at the appellate level. Yeah.
Well, even if you didn't have that demographic, how about this? You're charged with falsifying business records to perhaps influence an election, whatever that crime is. I don't know. First of all, if it's a federal crime, the New York State has no business prosecuting because it's not within the jurisdiction. But in the meantime, the judge permits into evidence Stormy Daniels to come into court and describe her the president's sexual positions, apparently, and what he was wearing has nothing to do with the trial whatsoever. And he permits the jury to hear it. The prosecution had to know that she's going to blurt that out. There's no way you can cure that. There was absolutely zero probative value, but it's just one more sort of effort to poison the jury. It's not to be fair.
Yeah, but they didn't object sufficiently, according to the judge, especially in light of the fact that the New York Court of Appeals had just weeks before reversed the Harvey Weinstein conviction on precisely those grounds. And you'd think that if this weren't Donald Trump, no prosecutor would take the risk of putting that kind of evidence on. And this judge was so biased, he allowed everything in the prosecution wanted in and nothing in the defense wanted in. He wanted this verdict, and he's gotten it. And, the title of my book has come true. Get Trump. They got Trump. And they may continue to get him even on appeal, because I don't know whether the judges, elected judges in New York, would have the courage to reverse a Donald Trump conviction, even if they had the courage to reverse a Harvey Weinstein conviction.
All right. Well, I've reported what the Biden Kamala Harris campaign statement is, but now Ian Sams, White House counsel's office spokesperson, has come out with a statement which is, we respect the rule of law and have no additional comment. So the rule of law, your thoughts on, is this the rule of law?
No, it's not the rule of law. It's the rule of partisan politics. The rule of law would never have allowed this case to be brought. There is no case in American history, none, where anybody was ever tried for failing to disclose in a corporate form the payment of non-disclosure money. It's never happened in history, and it will never happen again, and it would never happen if the name of the defendant weren't Donald Trump. They set out to find a crime against Trump, and they couldn't find a crime, so they made one up. This is a made-up case, a made-up crime.
What would you be telling your students at Harvard Law School, or even what's the message to the American people? What's sort of the message from this trial?
Well, first of all, if I try to tell it to my Harvard Law School students, I'd be booed. I'd be denied the right to come into my class because they would love this verdict. Because lawyers today, young lawyers today, don't care about justice. They just want their side to win. And this is all about what's happened to our American criminal justice system. Winning on partisan ground is more important than the rule of law.
When you were in the courtroom, there's one point when you were in the courtroom when the judge got angry and he threw everybody out of the courtroom, mostly everybody except you and a couple of the lawyers,
Yeah.
but they threw the media out. And I tell you, I would have preserved that as an issue because the trials are supposed to be open and public.
I tried to tell him to. I wouldn't have left the courthouse if he had tried to throw me out. I would have said, I have a constitutional right as a member of the public to see what you're doing, and I'm not leaving. You know, if they wanted to carry me out, they could have carried me out. But I wouldn't have left the courthouse voluntarily, the courtroom.
Jury instructions, again, that sort of gets down in the weeds, but so many cases when they are reversed, it's on bad jury instructions. Any jury instruction catch your attention, or I mean, that's pretty down in the weed. You have to read them.
No, a lot of them, though. The idea that you can have multiple choice as to which mental crime you believe he committed, and we don't know whether the jury agreed on all of them or disagreed on some of them. In light of how quick the verdict was and how unanimous on all the counts it was, probably they agreed on all of them, which is interesting because some of them clearly can't be sustained as a matter of law. The tax one is absurd. He didn't pay his taxes yet, and their argument is that he may have intended 2 years hence to take as a deduction something that was non-deductible, which, by the way, probably was deductible. But, all these underlying crimes just don't exist. And the instructions just enhanced everything. The instructions were basically, I read the instructions, a directed verdict for conviction. They were very conventional, but in the context of this case, they constituted a directed verdict for conviction.
You know what I find interesting? If you really fight for the constitutional rights for everybody, including aggressively for Donald Trump and aggressively for everybody, but aggressively for Donald Trump because he's entitled to the same constitutional rights as the rest of us, you suddenly get maligned as being a mega person just because you fight for the Constitution. And actually, you've probably been hit with that more than anybody.
Yeah.
You've been so strong on the Constitution for everybody, but the minute you do, they try to stomp all over you.
That's true. And, I didn't get that even for Jeffrey Epstein or for O.J. Simpson or for Harvey Weinstein, but for Donald Trump I did. And that's why you can't trust the judges to be willing to do the right thing here, because it will endanger their reputations. It will endanger their friendships. This Trump derangement syndrome is real. I invented that concept in the context of Israel. In the 1990s, I talked about Israel derangement syndrome, where you can talk to rational people about anything, but when you mention Israel, their brains turn into scrambled eggs. The same thing happens with Donald Trump, but much worse.
I don't think people realize the Constitution is not just some dopey piece of paper. It really does hold us together. We talk about the democracy, and when you hear people say that our democracy is, it's falling apart or whatever, it's fragile. It's a reminder by how important that document is, and to the extent people don't defend it.
Right. This has done more damage to our Constitution than anything that people allege Donald Trump has done. So let's understand what really does damage to the Constitution, targeting individuals and going after them, not for what they've done, but for who they are. And that's what, this goes back to the Bible. The Torah, the Jewish Bible, gives instructions to judges, and it says, Lo takir panim, do not recognize faces. You must do justice with a blindfold on. And if anybody thinks that anybody other than Donald Trump would have been tried for these crimes or would have been convicted for these crimes, there's a bridge not too far from the courthouse that I would be happy to sell them.
Allan Dershowitz, thank you, sir.
Thank you.